This is Bart Peterson, and you are listening to the FCPA Compliance Report on the Compliance Podcast Network.
This is Greg Gilchrist, and you are listening to the FCPA Compliance Report on the Compliance Podcast Network.
This is Dan DeMarco, and you are listening to the FCPA Compliance Report on the Compliance Podcast Network.
In this episode, I visit with Nick and Gio Gallo, the co-CEOs at Hotline, about the company's 2020 Ethics and Compliance Hotline Benchmark Report. We take a look at the data, how it was generated, the findings, the executive summary, some of the surprises, and how you can use the information to improve your compliance program going forward. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Pox back for another episode, and I'm extraordinarily pleased today to have the brothers Gallo join me, Nick and Gio from Hotline. They have recently issued the Hotline 2020 Benchmark Report, and it's a fascinating report. It has some fabulous information in it, and they were gracious enough to take some time to sit down and visit with me about it. So, gentlemen, first of all, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me.
Hey, Tom, we're glad to be here. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you on your podcast. We're big fans and excited to get into this today.
So why don't you tell the listeners what your roles are at the company?
So I'm Gio. I'm co-CEO with Nick, and one of my titles is Chief Development Officer. So spend time on our software and our kind of the direction of the products that we're offering to the market, and also help focus on the development of our people and our culture. Right now, just spending a lot of time talking to people in the market and helping people really just understand how we can help them out and how Hotline can serve them as they become clients, or as we just help them become more successful with our tools.
Yeah, and I am a chief servant, so we kind of view ourselves as the root of the tree. We're at the bottom of our organization here to kind of serve all of our people, make their lives easier so that we can serve as a group who our real boss, which is our client. So to sum that up, I kind of stand at the bottom of the hill with my arms open, waiting for all that crap to roll down, and I just catch it with a smile.
One of the things I really enjoyed about Hotline as a whole, and you guys as well, is your outreach to the compliance community. And you've done multiple things. You blog, you have podcasts, you have webinars, you have short educational videos. And now you've released a 2020 benchmark report. So I view this as part of your outreach. You may view it as a little bit differently, but it's a great resource. So could I start with asking, what's the genesis of the report, and how did you draw data for it?
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. We're always looking to do what we can to fulfill our mission to make the world a better workplace. And we do that through helping ethics experts and compliance leaders really just do their job better. And some of the things you mentioned are some on kind of the softer side of educational videos and helping empower our community and helping people see what a strategic lever they can be in their organization. And then we're always going to marry that with the more objective things, like some that are in this report, of data and benchmarking and things like that. In our products, we always have those two sides of it. We have the service and we have the technology that's scalable and things like that. So, we realized a couple of years ago that Hotline is providing service to leaders who care for over 6 million employees worldwide. And as we've done things like we do customer advisory boards with our clients, and kind of share best practices across people in the same industry and things like that, we've realized more and more how hungry compliance leaders are for some of these data to understand kind of where they stand. Everyone's working hard, everyone's trying to do their best, but when you get a sense for what the benchmark is, and that, okay, I'm kind of fine on these 3 or 4 metrics, but I can really improve here, we realized how valuable that was to our client base. So our first step for it was to build some internal benchmarking reports where we can compare client to client across an industry. And we've been doing that for a little over a year. And this year we kind of got all the data together to put this public report out there, because we're always going to serve our clients, but we also want to just serve the broader compliance community. And this was really a labor of love across a bunch of people on our team to get the data together. We had people in support and in sales and in marketing and our analytics team and operations and all of that, kind of getting putting this together because we realized from talking to our clients really how hungry people were for this, and we want to just share it with the world. You want to add anything to that, Nick?
Yeah, I think what I would add is as we started getting into our data, we kind of come at this game a little bit different. We kind of view compliance as this untapped resource in most organizations, this untapped strategic lever. And I think we're kind of standing at this precipice of a new era in compliance.
Yep.
And to echo some of the things Gio said, it's time for us to kind of elevate and make this check the box function, or as I think you've put it in the past, Tom, this function, this monster from the island of Dr. No, to kind of get them a seat at the table. And I think in order to do that, we need to do things a little bit differently. We need to use tools that we have in place in a more strategic way. And I think as we went out into the marketplace and saw kind of the NAVX report and some of the benchmarks and data points from there, and we compared those to, as Gio was saying, to our own metrics, we just saw like a material difference in sort of some of the ways that our clients were utilizing our tools and the types of results they were getting. And we wanted to kind of bring another voice to the market because, a lot of us are in these little cubby holes and we're, trying to push this rock up the hill, and we don't have a lot of insights into what other folks are doing. So just want to give another data point out there to show people what's possible and give them some tips on how they can really kind of elevate their function to get that seat at the table and earn it, so to speak.
And I know I've had you guys on other podcasts, but to remind our listeners, you guys come from private equity. You don't come from a compliance background. And I think that gives you a different perspective than certainly someone like myself, who's a legally trained professional, or someone who's even a compliance trained professional, to look at things in a different way, look at the numbers and see where they may be trending, and actually use the numbers to improve the process and the efficiency of the compliance function. So I really applaud that effort. I was wondering if we could turn to the report. We're not going to be able to have the time to go through the full report, but because it's over 40 pages. But could we start maybe with some of the highlights from the executive summary?
Yeah, I think there are a couple big takeaways from the executive summary. The report has 10 different items and metrics in it where we show our number, we compare it to kind of the industry report that people have been looking at for years, and then we also share some insights into if you're off, if you're kind of off the key benchmark number, what might be driving you to be higher or lower than that, and then what can you do to fix it. So a couple things that I would point out are, one, that this whole benchmarking game is about balance. There's not a lot that you can always tell by just looking at one number. And you really want to kind of balance considerations for, let's say, the amount of anonymous reports you have with your substantiation rate, or look at the total number of reports per employee you have against, your issue close time. So there's always some nuance in this, and we've done our best to help some people kind of see how these things tie together. But ultimately, this is about balancing your budget with your impact, with kind of these different metrics that are going to ultimately drive your risk management and a strong culture. So a couple things from the executive summary that I'd point out. One is just around reporting rate, what we see within our client base. And, like Nick said, we do this a little bit differently than the way a lot of people view compliance. We don't view compliance as a check the box. Let's just kind of be able to tell some external party that we do this thing. We see it as a really powerful way to impact the culture, align people around a mission, and obviously manage risk. So as we do that, we've seen that the reporting rate for our client base, which, I think more than most other vendors or hotline or whistleblower providers, our client base really does it right. And we see that they have a higher incidence of reporting per 100 employees, more around 4 reports per 100 employees versus the 1.4 that people are looking at. So to us, that speaks to a culture of transparency, a speak up culture, and a process from intake through to investigation that really engages employees and makes them part of the compliance efforts. And then kind of the bookend of that for me is that when this whole thing works right, and this whole thing, we kind of see an equation here of, if you have empathetic intake and you have a good employee engagement and you have systematic follow-up, then you can ultimately close cases faster. And what we're seeing in this report is that on average, people within our community and on our platform are closing cases with within 23 days on average. And that's compared to the 45-day that people might have thought was kind of good enough. And we just think that speaks to the strength of being dedicated to this process, having a fully integrated intake and investigation process that touches your culture. And we think that it's a really powerful thing, not to just keep companies safer, but to demonstrate the success and the professionalism of the compliance function. And ultimately, I think that when you do these things together, the compliance team is more relaxed and more focused on the things that matter instead of kind of trying to scramble.
Yeah, and on that case closure thing, I think what I would also add, and Tom, you and I have talked about this in the past, but you got to get those cases closed within 30 days. And the average is all well and good. It's great to have a lower average, but the distribution of that average is also super critical. If you have a really wide distribution where some cases are getting closed in a day and an equal amount are getting closed in 100 days or 120 days to arrive at that 23-day average, that's not as compelling if the overwhelming majority are happening under that 30 days. And what we've seen is that about 80% of our 80% of the cases in our system are getting closed within that 30-day window, and under 5% are getting closed over 90 days. So look, some stuff, as you well know, is going to take a long time. It could be a complex case. It could be hard to get in front of folks. But to echo Gio's point, I think the organizations that utilize compliance in a strategic way, they recognize the sort of externalities of what this function can have, or the externalities that can result, from this function working or not working, and the sort of far-reaching implications of those on culture, on turnover, on employee engagement, that silent killer in an organization. Those folks are really, really elevating it, and really, they're really driving some of that goodness that we're all trying to go after, and it's showing up in the numbers, which is exciting.
Yeah.
What were some of the key highlights for you guys, I guess, in terms of insights, but also in terms of did anything surprise you? Did it take you in a direction you weren't really expecting? Or were you able to really use this to help, I'm not sure the word educate would be correct, but work with your clients to create actual improvement, process improvement?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Gio and I, as we were kind of prepping for this, we were talking about this thing about the 4-minute mile. And for many years, there was a belief that no one could run a mile faster than 4 minutes. There were doctors that would say the human body would break down and explode and die and blah, blah, blah. And I think it was in the early 1900s, somebody finally broke the 4-minute mile. They got 3 minutes and 58 seconds or something. And within the next 2 months.
Can I just stop you there? 359 for Roger Bannister in 1954.
Yeah. So right after that, thank you for tightening that up, Tom. So right after that, then you see all these people start breaking this, this previously thought of, wall that was kind of impossible to get through. So part of what we found is that just showing people what's possible has allowed them to see, okay, well, wow, we can close 80% of our cases in less than 30 days. So part of it is just that psychological opening of the mind, so to speak, around, what's possible. I think what else was kind of surprising as we really started getting in the numbers was, and maybe this is a little bit selfish, but it was encouraging for us that our kind of our more arduous approach to compliance does result in the better outcomes that we're talking about. Like, we answer every call live. We lead with empathy over efficiency. Some of these things that, there's probably a cheaper way for us to run our business, they do end up resulting in some of these outcomes that we're all going after, and there's data to support it. So that was a surprise or a confirmation of something we had kind of hoped to see. But the extent of the differential, it wasn't just kind of little differences in a lot of these benchmarks. They were material differences. And again, it speaks to the potential that compliance can have to drive this better culture, or to really crowdsource risk in an effective way. Listening
to your answer, Nick, my relationship with you guys has really been an ongoing dialogue. It's been in podcasts, it's been in conversations, it's been in a number of ways, but it strikes me that to classify you guys as a product service provider might not be correct, because it seems to me that you're having this sort of ongoing dialogue with your customer base, and you're having throughout the year. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it's part of it's been part of our ethos since we were founded, and it's just part of how we view this. I think there are a lot of providers in this game who have kind of taken on this private equity mindset of, hey, let's be a software as a service company because we're going to be able to sell this to a bunch of people at some point. And we've seen all that acquisition kind of roll through the industry and drop service levels. For us, we were founded by compliance consultants who knew that compliance officers needed a better solution to a problem. And we've always been solution focused, not just product focused. And to your point, Tom, we invest a lot into a really wonderful and dedicated account management team that is calling people up and, doing reviews with them, that is identifying, anomalies within their system and driving conversations around how can we help get this better. And we also have a client success team that is looking specifically at the way people use our platform and our software and things like that, and say, hey, you might not be using this feature, but this could probably save your team, a few hours a week. And that's just part of how we do this, because for us, Nick talked about how Nick and I are kind of the base of the tree and we're at the bottom of our organizational chart. Well, the top of our org chart is the client, and we're all here to serve that client. So we're always looking for ways to figure out how can we make their job easier? How can we use our expertise? Because, we're thinking about this stuff all the time. We're processing all these reports. We're developing software and all that. How can we use that to help make them the hero within their own organization? And it's really just an approach that we take that we don't see a lot of other people do. We do it on Sanction Check, where we have our software and then we have full service on top of it. We have, we have it with the way that we provide support and all that. And ultimately, our dream is that every client that comes to us, as we cover more and more millions of employees around the world, a client sees us as an extension of their team and says, wow, it's so nice to have a vendor who actually cares about what I care about instead of just cares about what's going into their pocket and what I can enforce, with a legal contract.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that, Tom, is that, in the same way that Gio and I can't expect our team to be true servants to our clients if we're not the example of what a servant should be. And just like Compliance Line can't help, Fortune 500 organizations reinforce their culture if our own culture stinks, right? That same kind of dynamic is in play with this conversation we're talking about. A lot of compliance's potential in most organizations is shifting from kind of checking the box, doing tasks, and understanding that they're really part of a broader conversation, and it's that back and forth. And that's something that we touch on a lot in the report, that your intake channel is not just a sort of a bottomless comment box. It needs to be part of a conversation. So that's a give and take and a back and forth. So those same principles, I think, are rightly overlaid in our interaction with our clients, or at least that's where our heart is, because things are changing, to your point. Regulations are changing. There's new guidance coming out. A lot of these functions are greatly understaffed, under budget, tight budgets, and all of that kind of stuff. So if we're going to make the world a better workplace, it takes that kind of constant interaction and that constant back and forth to help them, climb this mountain that we're all trying to scale together.
Nick, it also strikes me that I had interpreted your role in servant leadership, servant to your employees, but I think that understates your role because you're a servant to a much broader set of stakeholders, starting with your clients.
Yeah, that's totally spot on. And, it's kind of nice that this triple bottom line discussion is starting to come into the zeitgeist. That's how we've run the company kind of from the start. But, that old saying, if a fish stinks, it stinks from the head. That goes both ways. So, we are serving, our servant leadership is in pursuit of Compliance Line being a great place to do business with, right? So there is that added dimensionality to this ethos that we're trying to put into work.
Yeah, and I think that, Tom, I appreciate you bringing up kind of how we as a company are living this out. Ultimately, this ties back into the benchmark report and why this is relevant, not just why we put it out, but how our clients can use it. Because internally, Nick and I are servants to our team, and we have values around that, around servanthood, accountability, and tenacity. That's kind of our internal values and culture. And then externally to our clients, we have, this brand promise that Compliance Line cares. We're client focused. We're responsive. We're servants to our clients. And ultimately, there's a nice linkage here, because ultimately our clients, I think, as people and as an organization, they're servants to their organization. They are the conscience of the organization. They're looking out for things that, people let slip through the cracks. And we're trying to help them be that hero and be that servant within their organization to keep their people safe, to make sure that a risk doesn't, dismantle a division or wreck a reputation or something like that. And, I think that the heart that Nick and I have to serve our clients and our employees is similar to the heart that, compliance officers have. As you interview them, you hear them talk about, what they care about, and they care about people and getting this job done and stuff like that. And I think that when we can all link arms, we can really make the world a better workplace.
I wanted to close with a kind of an observation of the report and a specific question. One of the things throughout the report is you give specific steps that companies can take to either remedy a process, improve a process, and you have a section called Actionable Steps on page 37. And I was wondering if you could just kind of go through those and touch on those, because it strikes me even more so now it's part of your ongoing outreach and communications with the broader compliance community.
Yeah, I think the first one we kind of touched on a little bit, and that is that your hotline is really the start of a conversation. It's not just this bottomless comment box. So I think when we can reframe that, and you can recognize that you're never going to have an organization that your clients love if it's not full of employees who love that organization first. And so that's the essence of a relationship there, right? So any relationship is sort of foundationally built on some kind of belonging. Well, that belonging is going to be, you need a conversation and a voice to be heard in the context of the system. So I think recognizing that places a greater onus on the investigations team. Not that they just have to process what's the next report in my queue, but that recognizing that there's a person behind that, and this person overcame some kind of anxiety to raise their hand about something that is bothering them or something that they feel doesn't fit in their organization. And we, as servants to our organization, as compliance leaders, it's on us to make sure that that person knows that we care about what they said and that we value them raising their hand and speaking up, and that we're going to do something about it. So kicking off that conversational flywheel is just a super powerful way that compliance can help reinforce that speak up culture that we're trying to drive.
The next one is about how recognizing that your intake processes and your hotline, they're a resource for the whole organization. And, if this process is just looked at, hey, this creates some work for the compliance team and we just got to follow up on these issues, you're really missing a lot of the benefit that you can get by engaging the whole organization and realizing that, we see the stories of compliance finding something that, saves an investment in the manufacturing area, or the compliance team coming up with something that finds an inefficiency in a process and really makes the whole sales team,
right,
be able to sell this in a different way or whatever it might be. And recognizing that your whole organization is going to benefit from a strong compliance function can help open up your eyes and help you see the whole horizon of the impact that we can have. And, there's ultimately this discussion around, well, should we wait for the CEO to call on compliance to kind of step up into the role that we know we can take, or should we lead ourselves there and lead the organization there and be ready for it? I'll take either one. Anything that kind of gives more focus and respect to the compliance organization, I'm down for. But I think if you're not getting you're not getting pulled into those conversations by the board and the execs, then you can lead that by building kind of cross-functional collaboration across other divisions and help make this ethics and compliance function something that makes the whole company better.
Yeah, and I think if I can add to that, Christy Granhart just put out an article yesterday, and in it was a quote where somebody was asking, hey, you should ask all compliance officers, how many board members do you have in your phone? This was a question around sort of compliance and independence, but I think it's a great question, especially when you look kind of internally across the organization. We as compliance leaders need to have the CFO's number in our phone and the chief of strategies in our phone and the HR person in our phone. And I think many times as an organization grows, especially when you're understaffed and so forth, you end up kind of coming into that pigeonhole or that cubby hole and you have your head down and you're just doing your work. And again, as that complexity increases, sometimes kind of silos can be erected between these different divisions. So getting back to this being a resource for your whole organization, Compliance Line can help reach across the aisle, so to speak, and help solve a problem in HR, or help solve a problem in strategy, or in finance using some of our tools. So reaching out across the aisle and saying, hey, I have this tool in place. Would this be able, would you guys be able to utilize this is a quick way to get some wins and engender some goodwill from a reciprocity standpoint to start building those more strategic relationships within the organization. But if compliance remains an island, it's never going to elevate to that real strategic impact it has the potential to have.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time, but I was wondering if listeners wanted more information on either the 2020 benchmark report or Compliance Line, where could they go?
Yeah, so they should definitely go to complianceline.com. In our resources section, they can download this report. We have a really robust resource section with ebooks and white papers and blogs and videos and webinars and stuff like that. So that's a bunch of stuff that we just put out there to help compliance leaders be better and more successful. And I'll share a link with you, Tom, in case you want to put it in the show notes so people can get this report directly. You can always catch me and Nick and Compliance Line generally on LinkedIn. We're doing a lot there to share the things that we think are going to make the world a better workplace.
And, whether you're a client or not, reach out and you want to go over the report or brainstorm some ways to use your current kind of tool set to improve and to elevate, reach out. Like Gio said, our purpose is to make the world a better workplace, and we're going to do that one way or another. And so we just want to help and be a positive impact on our community and the shared mission that we all have to improve and make our workplaces safer and more engaging.
And I would just add that you can check out two podcasts, Compliance Live and The Ethics Expert, on the Compliance Podcast Network, both produced by the brothers Gallo and their team at Compliance Line. So, gentlemen, as always, it's been a ton of fun. Thanks so much for the report, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Tom. Love your work, man. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tom. Had a blast.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of the FCPA Compliance Report. I hope you'll join me again next week, where I take a look at an issue related to the FCPA, compliance, and ethics. We have two great new podcast series on the Compliance Podcast Network that I hope you're aware of. The first one is Compliance and Coronavirus, where I try to bring sanity and clarity to the compliance practitioner and the business executive around coronavirus. Also, the Compliance Life features one CCO a month talking about their journey to the CCO chair and beyond in 4 parts. This month, it's Ryan Robillé, who has a fascinating journey. Also, if you're a fan of Teddy Roosevelt, I have a series on 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership hosted by Richard Lummis, where we're looking at Teddy Roosevelt, his life, his presidency, and beyond, and what its messages are for the leaders of today. It's a fascinating series. I know you will enjoy it, and it's particularly important for compliance practitioners to take a look at leadership skills. I hope you'll join me again next week for our next episode of the FCPA Compliance Report. The FCPA Compliance Report is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks again for listening.